He had to leave to go to the airport. So we were sitting there and suddenly Roy's bags, or what seemed to be Roy's bags, started to be brought out to reception. We thought, he's about to leave. Happy days. But then a bellboy came running round the corner and said, Mr. Keane, he's left out the back door in a white van. Well, of course, we all want the story. We all want the pictures, so we all went together.
Stephen and his new photographer friends jumped into their own white van.
There was a heightened tension within that van because we thought we'd missed him. He said to the guy, you gotta get there, you gotta get there, you gotta hurry up, get there. And suddenly, very close to the airport, we saw a white van and we were euphoric. And someone said, he clocked us, Keane clocked us, so Roy knew that he'd been rumbled. And he jumped out of the van and then kind of all hell broke loose, I suppose. And the flash bulbs went off left, right and centre. I said to the cameraman, we need to go and ask some questions.
Any comments to make it all right?
And I fired off 4, 5, 6 questions and he never changed his gaze. He never even looked at me.
Roy, can you give us just one reaction being sent home from the World Cup?
I didn't think he would speak, to be honest, because he just was going to put the head down, ignore everybody, and then try and get through that airport as quickly as he could. I can't stress enough how small this airport was. Roy had to stand in the queue and check himself in. But then we stood for a few minutes and he was still in the queue, and I said, you know what, let's go back again. And he eventually gave us some short answers.
It's been a very tough week. Inside, mentally, how are you feeling right now?
Great. Good to be going home.
But those short answers were gold dust.
Can you give us any insight into what happened last night?
No.
It was a short interview, but anything that Roy Keane said was going to be powerful.
Can you even tell us how you're feeling at the moment?
Feel very good.
There are loads of questions I wanted to ask him, but the one I really wanted to ask him was, did he have any regrets?
Any regrets at all?
No regrets.
Not even about playing in the World Cup?
There's more important things to worry about.
And to me, he didn't need to say anything else because that said it all.
No regrets.
Not even about playing?
I got a world exclusive interview with Roy Keane at the airport. I knew we were the only people that had got him to utter anything because I knew the other journalists he hadn't spoken to.
Chin jutting out, he had no regrets, which I can imagine was exactly what you'd expect Roy to say. But I also can imagine inside he must have been going, what has happened to my World Cup dream? So yeah, it was a great scoop.
Stephen had beaten the pack to the exclusive, but straight away he faced a familiar problem.
How in God's name am I gonna actually get this home? We've got the biggest story we've ever had. I'm sitting with it in a tape and I can't get it on air. I thought, what am I gonna do? I gotta get the tape on the plane. Eventually, I met one of the other journalists who had stayed behind. It was called Paul Hyland. I said to him, would you take this tape to Tokyo? And he went, will you give me something out of the interview? And I went, I'm thinking, oh no, like, I've got the biggest story in my life, I'm not gonna have to give it away, but I've no options. And I said, right, okay, if you take a tape. He said, no regrets. He said he's no regrets. He goes, that's all I need.
Stephen's quote from his interview with Roy made the front page of the Evening Herald. In return, Stephen's tape was heading for Tokyo to be beamed back to Belfast, and within hours, his world exclusive interview was on air.
So the Republic of Ireland prepare for their opening World Cup game against Cameroon in 8 days' time without their inspirational captain. He exits the biggest footballing tournament in the world alone and in disgrace. Stephen Watson, BBC Newsline, Saipan.
It's a short interview, but what he says is pretty powerful. That he said no regrets, and he's happy to be going home and missing the World Cup. You know, For the captain of his country to say that, it was a big deal.
By now, the Irish press pack was at the team's new base in Izumo in Japan. From here, they tried to keep up with the story back home, where the Irish government was attempting to negotiate a resolution. In Ireland, the unfolding story was rocking the country.
Whoever you blame over Roy Keane's departure, the fact is he's gone. Who'd have thought less than a week into the Republic of Ireland's campaign it would have come to this?
There are moves at home to try and, get him to change his mind. And then at a political level, it was something that the government, Bertie Ahern, was trying to get people involved to bring Roy back.
Supporters had been pinning their hopes on the Taoiseach's intervention. A spokesperson for Bertie Ahern said the Taoiseach had made contact with Roy Keane through a third party.
The time zone was probably an issue, but there was a miscommunication, misunderstanding. We were asked by the team, by Mick, did we know what was happening at home? And I don't think the team and the FAI on the ground really could realise how much of an impact it was having.
They were split down the middle, There was a pro-Man U camp, there was a pro-Keane, there was pro-McCarthy, there was brothers against brothers, fathers against fathers. This is a civil war.
I was gobsmacked because he should be there.
I'd be very disappointed in him. I'm sure it must be stress or some other reason. It's probably not just the facilities.
I don't blame Mick McCartney for sending him home. That's what he deserves.
There were hopes for a truce when Roy, now back home in Manchester, agreed to another interview. This time with RTE's hard news correspondent, Tommy Gorman.
Roy Keane speaks about the events which led to his departure from Ireland's World Cup squad.
The way we followed the Tommy Gorman interview was my mother back home holding her phone up to the TV and me and a crowd of other journalists listening to the phone in my hotel room at the other end.
I questioned the training facilities, which I said to Mick.
In Japan, Stephen Watson asked Mick if there was any chance Roy could return.
I think the correct and proper procedure for a protocol for an apology is for somebody to pick the phone up and ring the person who feels the apology needs to be said to.
If Mick received an apology for Roy's behaviour, well, there might be a chance.
I try to live my life as honest as I can. I've made mistakes, probably more mistakes than anybody. And I've done things that I'm ashamed of over the years. But I'm sticking to my guns because I believe, my gut feeling is right.
With just 3 days left until Ireland's opening game against Cameroon, Keane's absence will continue to overshadow their World Cup preparations. Stephen Watson, BBC Newsline in Izumo.
Yeah, so it didn't even matter when the Ireland team then went to their training base in Japan. This story just went on and on and on and on until the point where he absolutely was not coming back.
It was now clear to all of Ireland that their dreams of Roy Keane lifting the World Cup were over.
Glad to be home, Mr. Keane.
I eventually got a phone call out of Japan to my parents. Got speaking to my dad, and my dad said, they're laying reeds outside the FAI as we speak. I said, they're doing what? I said, are you serious? He said, yep. And I quickly realised that that was over, and we had to move on with the tournament without him.
The rest of the Irish squad now had to accept that their captain wasn't coming back.
After training another twist, the players issued a statement which they'd drawn up that morning after a meeting with the manager. Keane left them with no alternative.
The players, especially the younger players, can't take any more. It had to come to this.
We might be dead, but we're never buried. Never!
They had lost their captain, but the boys in green didn't give up and made it to the final 16.
They did it, Brad. It was the most exciting match in the history of the World Cup this year. It was unbelievable.
All this without their most famous player.
You didn't miss Roy Keane in the end.
Who's that? There's only one Keane, and that's Robbie Keane.
Saipan must be a metaphor for what we just left behind. A volcanic island in the middle of nowhere that erupted with the biggest story of my career.
It's looking back on it now, it's quite painful, it's quite shocking. And yet, it was something that was waiting to happen at the same time. It just happened to be there at the worst possible time, at the biggest possible moment.
Nobody gained from it. Roy lost out terribly. Mick will be forever remembered by that. And as a public, as a nation, we're kind of left with that sense of what if and regret for how things unfolded the way they did.
25 years on, it's the biggest story I've ever worked on. Every moment that Ireland were still in that tournament, the Roy Keane story still cast a shadow, a huge shadow over absolutely everything.
The hottest subject in Irish sport, still to this day, is the two-syllable word, Saipan. Then, now, and always will be.
A number of years ago, Niall Quinn's autobiography came out. He said in his autobiography that in the changing room at the World Cup after Roy Keane went home, they wrote on the wall, "No regrets." And I was like, that's class.
Any regrets at all?
No regrets.